Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers Inspiration. I'm your host, Harriet Cole. As always, honored to be with you today. This is a day to be inspired. I hope that as you woke up this morning, you had that conscious intention that you were going to look for the inspiration in the day and be able to align with that. I think that it's important for us to make the conscious choice because everything happens in the course of a day. And in order to be in the flow of the energy that you want to be in the flow of, you have to choose it. Or at least that's what I've learned. It's much easier to be in that flow if from the start, from the moment you wake up, you make the conscious choice. This is how I'm going to live today. This is what I intend to see today. This is how I want to be today. One of the things that we do, those of us who join together for inspiration every week, is to make the choice to be together, to be in this covenant, to help ourselves and each other to be uplifted, to make the choice to see through the best possible lens how we can navigate putting our best self forward, putting our strengths forward, as it says in the intro, to really tap into our greatness. I had an incredible weekend, very, very busy, and one highlight of the weekend prompted the focus for today, which is listen. I was honored by the Black Authors Festival. It was the third annual Black Authors Festival in Sag Harbor, in my happy place. There were a number of authors who were included among the honorees, several whom you may know. Don Lemon, formerly of CNN, who has his own very big show on YouTube now. Sunny Hostin from The View. Mark Morial, the head of the National Urban League, and Alton Fitzgerald White, who played more than 4,000 times as Mufasa in The Lion King. Amazing. As well as some other wonderful people, including a 15-year-old poet who was so poised. We were all incredibly proud of this young woman who, as a teenager, is really stepping into her fullness already. It was really special to be in the company of all of the honorees, as well as those gathered to celebrate us and literacy among African Americans in particular. And I want to say, given this wave toward book banning and interest in squashing the intelligence and humanity of many people, including Black people, this was a welcome respite, a time of celebration, a time of honoring each other. And there was a panel of women, a number of us who were authors being honored, led by the editor-in-chief of Newsday, who is a Black woman. I didn't know that. And on this panel, we talked about some pretty serious topics about our future, about the power of women in our community, about some of the challenges that we face. And at a certain point, there was a gentleman who, when we had Q&A, there was a gentleman who asked a question. And I should give a little bit more context. There was an item in the news that was reported in the past week that more than 300,000 African American women have lost their jobs since the beginning of this year. Professional women in particular. That is a shocking number. Let me also say that it is not only African American women who have lost their jobs. There's been just an incredible wave, kind of like a tidal wave of people being washed away from their work, and if not completely, having slashed budgets for whatever their work is. So this is a really challenging time for many people, as it was pointed out in government, because so many government jobs have been cut. There's a lot of contraction. And from that context, a gentleman raised his hand. He said he's a father, a grandfather, a husband, and he wanted to know, what can men do to support our women during this time? I thought that was an excellent question. I think it's an excellent question anyway, but especially now. What can men do to support the women in their lives at this time? And I wonder, what would you say? What answer would you give to that question? If you think about, if you have a male spouse, if you have a brother, father, friend who is a male, what would you want that male to do to support you? That was the question posed to our group. And my answer was the focus of today's meditation, which is listen, listen, listen. And I want to expand this because it's not just for men, it's for all of us. Listen. And I want to ask you, how often do you actually listen when people are talking to you? You know, the way into this point was at times of contraction, at times of challenge, at times of loss, at times of fragility. What can you do to support a woman? And I'll say now, and each other, listen. And how many times do you do that? If you ask yourself this question honestly and survey your life, you could just think about yesterday, the day before, the past week. How often have you listened? How often have you just waited to jump in as soon as somebody's finished talking so that you can make a point? How often have you heard something and you came up with a solution right away, and all you want to do is share your solution for the problem? And let me back up, and hopefully this does not sound sexist, but something that I shared in that event was, because I find this to be true, that men very often want to fix things. I think it might be part of their DNA, I'm not sure. But my experience across the board from many men who are personally in my life, as well as clients and people I've met, the thousands of people I've met along the road of my journey, very often, commonly, I find that men want to fix things. They want to solve whatever the problem is, whatever the challenge is. And often, in that effort to want to solve something, they aren't listening. This is no indictment of men. I think this is true about many of us, but I'm responding to that particular question. How often do you listen? Whoever you are, male, female, whoever you are, however you define yourself, how often do you listen? And I want you to seriously think about this. How often do you listen? How often do you actually position yourself to be still, to lean in, to hear what people are saying to you, and to listen beyond the words, to observe the whole moment so that you can see what people are saying, you can feel what they're feeling, you can be with them to the point where you are engaging them fully, which means you don't have an agenda. You are present with them because you care, because you are willing to breathe and be present. Just be there. How often do you do that? And do you think it's valuable? I ask this because I think it's so incredibly important. Of course, there are moments when, especially in a social setting, you have light conversation. You're not trying to solve the world. But in times like these, there are a lot of tender moments. When you ask people, how are you doing? And they say, oh, I'm fine. Are you? Are they? Maybe there's a better question so that you're not asking for something superficial because that's all you have time for. How can we be more present with each other? How do you feel when people halfway hear you? How do you feel when you are saying something and somebody jumps all over to say something else? It feels like a diss to me. Does it feel like that to you? I know a couple of times this weekend, there was a big group of people and everybody's talking. And, in a social setting, everybody's going just engaged. Even then, when you've got a lot of animated people, I think it's still important to find the rhythm of the conversation and make sure that everybody has a chance to contribute. To be aware, even in your most animated state, be aware of your surroundings. Who's with you? Who's talking? Have you given space for the people who are not extroverts to speak as well? If someone makes the effort to speak up, do you give them space to say whatever it is that they want to contribute? Do you, as a speaker, recognize when you've gone on too long and you need to pull back? The art of conversation is something that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to. Not the way that I learned when I was growing up. There's an art to it. There's a dance to it. You need to make space for everybody who is part of whatever that circle is to be included. So even when you're not trying to solve the world, you still want to be respectful and make space for everyone. And I hope as you're hearing this, you're thinking about interactions that you've had and assessing yourself. How well have you done? How well have you communicated with others? How well have you been a participant in a conversation where you've had your time to talk, you've made sure that there's space for other people to talk, you've stood up for other people when, well, hold on just a minute, let so-and-so say something. How good are you at being in conversation, speaking and listening with people? This is a very social time of year. And I think it's a great thing for us to think about listening on all different levels. There's that intimate listening when it's you and another person. And whether it was a conscious agreement or not, when you're with someone, you're there and you make the decision to be with that person. In that moment, are you listening as well as speaking? Now, I have plenty of people in my life who in those moments like to just talk. I'm going to tell you everything that's happening in my world. Hear all the things, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and now I have to go. How do you feel then? Sometimes you feel like somebody just dumped everything of their life on you, and you have now the weight of whatever that is, whether it's joyous weight or frustrated weight or whatever it might be, but then they're gone and you haven't had a chance to communicate. When it's lopsided, when it's one-sided, we don't feel so good about that. In those intimate engagements, make space for both of you to engage, to interact. In a social setting, even if it's just for a few minutes, make space for everyone to be part of the interaction. If you notice somebody kind of standing on the outside of a circle, physically make space so that that person can come in and be part of that covenant. If someone's really quiet, ask that person a question. Invite the person to be part of the interaction. The art of engagement, the grace that can be part of interaction if you pay attention is really beautiful. And if you don't pay attention and you just are barreling through, it's not pretty. And so I really want us to think about this. Think about your behavior. How do you listen? Are you good at it? Could you be better at it? So one of the things that I noticed this weekend, a lot of people talking. There were about 6 or 7 people at one point. Yeah, a lot of animation. So sometimes people talking over each other. But there came a point when, I'll say for myself, I talk for a living. So I don't have the need, generally, I don't think I have to talk in this social setting. And so I talked some, but I was at a certain point, I was attempting to make a point. And every time I attempted to make a point, someone in the group talked over me and just barreled right over me. And after a while, I realized, oh, this is happening. Okay, it's not that important. I'm just not going to say what I was going to say because I'm not interested in being in the war of the words. If I talk louder, maybe you'll stop talking. Not that important to me, but it was rude. At a certain point, someone in the group noticed and said, oh, what were you trying to say, Harriet? I then again attempted to get my point out. And this other person talked a little louder. Did I notice it? Of course, I'm telling it to you right now. Was it frustrating? A little bit. Did it break my spirit? Absolutely not. I don't get my confidence from other people. You shouldn't get yours from other people too, because that does not work. But it's not, being in the company, pardon me, of rudeness is not desirable. It's way better to be in the company of people who are reading the moment, who are noticing, what is going on. At one point, there was a person in the group who had something to contribute that would be helpful and in supporting what we were talking about, who wasn't even trying to jump in because it was so animated. And so I said, well, so-and-so has something to share that would be really great. And at first, nobody heard because it's a lot of animation. But I said it again, and then they listened. And then there was a contributed point that was then built upon in the course of this conversation. I hope that my talking about this is helpful to you. The reason I brought it up is that I find so often that people do not listen. The reason I even thought about it at all is because the man at the Black Authors Festival asked the question, how can men be helpful to women in these moments? But honestly, extrapolating it much further beyond that, it is for all of us. What is the best thing that we can do? Listen. Close your mouth and listen for a minute. Pay attention. Really listen so that then you can contribute something meaningful, even if it is in one of those 2 or 3 minute conversations as you're flitting about in a social environment. If it's at work when you're with your coworkers or your boss, if it's with your children and you're busy, take a beat, take a breath, listen fully before you move on to the next thing. It's so important to do. I'm going to say hi. I see Kimberly and Bridget and Donna. How are you all? Hello to all of you and to everybody else who's joined all over wherever you are. If you want to say where you are, we want to know. I'm in my happy place in Sag Harbor. Where are you? Tell us where you are. And if you want to write in the chat box what your thoughts are about listening, feel free to do so. I think this is such an important topic. And let's look at the quote that I found. There are a lot of very interesting thoughts about the power of listening. Let's look at the quote that I wanted to share with you all today. Somewhere we know that without silence, words lose their meaning. That without listening, speaking no longer heals. That without distance, closeness cannot cure. From Henry Nouwen. Maybe it's Henri Nouwen. So let's listen to this again. Maybe close your eyes and listen. This is pretty deep and we want to unpack it. Somewhere we know that without silence, words lose their meaning. Think about that. My father used to call some people motor mouth if they just talked and talked and talked and talked. If you don't pause, if there isn't silence around words, you can't take in what you just heard. Somewhere we know that without silence, words lose their meaning. It is something that we learn about international business and culture. Americans often talk, 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 talk. In particular, I've heard this from people who've done business with folks in Japan, who part of their culture is to practice the pause, to practice silence. And they have shared that there's so much information that happens when you don't say anything. You don't have to fill space with a lot of words. You can be still and allow the words that have come out of your mouth or those that have come out of others to resonate right then and there. Wow, there's someone who just wrote that I feel ignored and looked over. That is what happens when folks don't listen to you. That's one thing that can happen. And I mean, even as I've read it, I feel it in my heart, what you must be feeling. When people don't listen, when you feel that they don't see you, or they don't care, they don't value what you have to say, it's not just feeling ignored, you're being ignored. You're being ignored and not valued, looked over, looked past. It's hard when you have that feeling. And I think when you do, first you need to go inside and find that self-validation. Go inside and connect to the divinity within so that you really do draw upon your greatness from within, especially if you're not feeling it from those around you. And then make sure that you connect with someone who does value you, because we do need humankind as well. So somewhere we know that without listening, speaking no longer heals. This is building on that point. Without listening, speaking no longer heals. Because if there's no listening going on, what are the words? What do they mean? Where's the value in the words if there's no listening? Sometimes, have you ever had this happen? You say something that you think is really important to someone else, and they say something that has nothing to do with what you were talking about. There's just something completely different. That happened to me recently, and I said, what? What are you talking about? Well, it's stream of consciousness. You said that, and it made me think of this. I feel like that's an out. Sometimes it's stream of consciousness. You say something, that reminds me of this. But even then, should there be a bridge? Should you acknowledge what the person said before you jump to something completely different? What do you think? We have someone from DC, and then a curated simplicity says, I just told one on Saturday to yield and let others speak. Sometimes we have to speak up and tell folks, hold on. You know, in the same conversation, it was, let me also say that this was a fun gathering. There was a lot of conversation going on. It was really fun. And there were these moments. So one person was talking and telling story after story and not even having a breath in between stories so that someone could jump in and say something. And at a certain point, I wanted to contribute something. And so I said, wait a minute. I want to tell you something based upon what you just shared. I have a build on that. And the person sort of stopped for a moment. Oh, I don't even think he realized that it was almost like there was a run-on sentence that went on for about 8 minutes. It's not like jumping in too soon. It was a very long run-on sentence. And when jolted, oh, yeah, sure. Yes, of course. Of course you can share something. We are often not conscious of how we are engaging others. So without listening, speaking no longer heals. That is very deep, very powerful. If you aren't listening, how can you heal? Because, you know, if you're not paying attention, what are you healing? Without distance, closeness cannot cure. That one, without distance, closeness cannot cure. So if you're just up on top of each other, this is one way of looking. You're just here, always here, always here. Then there's no perspective. This is why it's so important to have alone time. This is why I value meditation so much. Having your time alone, distance from others, closeness with yourself, closeness with divinity. When you create space for that distance from others, you can gain clarity. With clarity, engagement can have more power, can have a healing curative power. This is deep. This Henri Nouwen, I looked at a couple of different quotes that really resonated with me, but this one in particular. So I'm going to read the whole thing again for all of us and just let us sit with it for just another moment. Somewhere we know that without silence, words lose their meaning. That without listening, speaking no longer heals. That without distance, closeness cannot cure. It says to me, number one, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to create space to be with ourselves, to love ourselves, to find a way, find healing from the inside out, and also by consciously connecting with people who do listen, who do pay attention, who do have the patience and the time to be with us. Because otherwise we end up being in that situation of feeling ignored and overlooked and undervalued. Donna says, lack of listening sometimes makes you lose valuable blessings all the time. A blessing can be right in front of your face. And if you aren't paying attention, if you aren't really present in that moment, then what happens? We don't want to squander our blessings. We want to hug them. We want to lay them on our being, on our soul. We want to acknowledge them and express gratitude for our blessings. We need blessings now. We need that shower of blessings every day that tells us we are valuable, we are worth it, we can be worthy warriors in this life, because there are many things that we need to do in order to be strong for ourselves, for our children, for our families, for our community. It is impossible to stay strong without love. It is impossible to heal ourselves without feeling that we're heard. We need to be heard, seen, valued, and respected. These are things that everyone wants and needs. We want and need to be seen. We want and need to be heard. We want and need to be valued and loved. And so, of course, it starts with loving yourself. Not so easy to do, by the way. When we feel tender, we often don't feel valuable. We often don't feel loved. For those 300 plus thousand women who've lost their jobs, that's tender feelings right now. That's fear. There's a lot of worry. And what about all the other people who aren't part of that number, where there has been loss, where there has been pain, where there's uncertainty? One of our friends this weekend learned that her mom needs to get a pacemaker. She didn't know what was going on. Her mom didn't know. Thank God she's here. And hopefully there's a way to strengthen her body so she can be here longer. Things happen. Folks, another friend of mine, Pam, said they're like, I can't remember the number. There were like more than 10 people in the past few months who have transitioned, who are part of her world or the world of her community of loved ones. That's a lot of loss. What do we do during these times? We hug each other, we love each other, we listen to each other. We help to heal each other through our intention and through our willingness to be still and listen and acknowledge what we have heard. So I do hope that as you go through this day and this week, that you practice active listening. Listen to yourself. What do you need? What do you want? What do you deserve? Listen to your coworkers. Listen to your boss. Listen to your family members. Listen to your neighbors. Listen to the person who's driving the bus. Listen to the person who's serving you coffee. Whoever crosses your path, listen. Listen. You don't always have to even talk, but acknowledge that you have heard what was said. That is how you share value. That is how you reflect value back to others. Thank you for joining me today. Please use every moment of today and moving forward. Just practice in this week. Practice listening. Hi, Leslie. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Until next time, have a great day and make it count. Namaste.